Today on Art Matters with Mr. Morris, finding the value in value.
Da 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 da. Woo! Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Woo! Da 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 da. Art Matters with Mr. Morris. Yeah.
Line becomes shape. Shape becomes pattern. Patterns become textures. Textures can have color. Color has value. Let me show you what I mean with this piece of artwork.
Remember, color has value. When I take this artwork, and it's all colorful right now, and I remove the color from it, you still see different forms of light and dark. You still see different values within it. In some cases, those values were because of the color choices, and in some cases, it just has to do with the saturation of the pigment, or it could have simply had to do with how little pigment was located in one area. It's the subtle differences that we see in gray tones or tints that show us that something is three-dimensional. If it looks three-dimensional, then we say it has form. So in that way, we can say value shows form. Look at these three blocks. One's white, one's gray, and one's black. And next to each other, they have different values. But when I turn each one of them onto their sides, now you see that white has a gray side and a white side. That gray has solid gray, and that black even has a lighter gray on one side, and it has black on the other. You see, value can be anywhere and everywhere. Even on a white surface, whenever there's a shadow, whenever there's a shade, whenever there's a tint, you're going to see a change in the value.
You see, no matter what you do, value is all around you. I suppose you could turn off all the lights, close your eyes, and hide in the dark. Then you wouldn't really see value. But as long as there's a little itty-bitty tiny point of light, then there's going to be value. Value deals with light and dark. It deals with shadow and highlight. Value is literally how our vision is built. Without value, we can't see. For example, if I filled a white room with bright lights, and I put on a white suit and painted my skin white, I would disappear. As long as the lights make it so there's no shadow showing, there's lights 360 degrees all around, you wouldn't see me. We need value. Without value, everything's white or it's black. But the world is full of shades of gray. Lots of gray. Lots of areas of gray. Different tones of colors. When we say tones of colors, we're really talking about the value of those colors. In the simplest terms, value has to do with the level of light or dark. When you're making a piece of artwork, the way I like to think of it is this. The more time you spend doing things like shading and working on your artwork, the more you're increasing the value or the amount of material that you've added onto that blank sheet of paper. There are literally millions of ways of building value. I can build value with scribbles. I can build value with patterns. I can build value with a technique we call shading. I can build value with stippling. Basically, I can build value with anything if I can change the density of that thing. What I mean is, if I took 10,000 bowling balls and I arranged them in a big circle and I had more bowling balls on one side than on the other, I went up on a helicopter, took a picture of it, it's going to have a sense of value. Where the bowling balls are closer together, it makes it appear darker. And where they're further apart, it makes them appear lighter. When objects are closer together, they appear darker. When they're further apart, they appear lighter. Now, a lot of people get value confused with shading. Let me clear up what that actually means. Value is one of our elements of art. It's a fundamental thing that's found in any kind of imagery that you find anywhere. A technique is the way in which we apply the medium, or what we're making the artwork with, to the support, or what we're putting the artwork on. If I take a pencil and I put it down and I go sideways and I vary the pressure, I can start to do what we call shading. Our lesson this week is all about value and building value. At the start of all this, I told you, don't worry about your mistakes. Draw your lines lightly, and eventually we would get to a lesson where I would be able to show you how not important those little mistakes were, those extra lines. This is the lesson. Because today we're going over how to shade, how to add value, how to layer your drawing so that those mistakes ended up becoming more a guideline for what not to do, but ultimately helped to show you what to do. And now we're covering them up. There was no erasing needed. Building value is a huge part of doing 2D visual art. But we're also going to talk about stippling, scribbling, a whole bunch of other ways that we can build value up. We're going to visit these sketchbook worksheets and we're going to complete them today. So let's go to our mini demo table.
From here on out, I want you to keep in mind this is a mechanical pencil. Don't use them anymore. No more mechanical pencils. They're used for making lines, but they're not good for doing much else in art. So we're going to throw that to the side, and we are going to pull out a old-fashioned pencil. Use these. Worksheet 1. First, we're going to need our value worksheet, and I want you to read through it real quick. Color has value. And it's shown in many different ways. We're going to be discussing those like cross-hatching and shading and blah, 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 blah. Keep on going through. Make sure you're using a regular pencil again for doing this. Shading is where I'm going to, on my paper, push down. And the harder I push, the darker the value. The lighter I push, the lighter the value. When I'm doing this, I'm not just moving the pencil back and forth, though. I'm actually doing tiny little circles. Just like on our last coloring exercise, you can see I'm slowing down right here. You see I'm doing these little overlapping tiny ellipses or circles or ovals, however you want to call them. But I'm layering my graphite. I'm not just trying to put it down in one go. I'm trying to build up layers of the graphite. The graphite's what's inside the pencil, by the way. And as I shade in, going from light to dark or dark to light or back and forth, I want to make sure that I'm going back over what I've done. And I want to continue trying to refine and clean it up, try to make it look nice and even. I shouldn't be able to see your individual pencil lines. That's part of the reason why we're not using mechanical pencil is it's really hard to cover up a mechanical pencil's individual pencil line. To understand our next method of using value called color transition, first let me show you the difference between these two colors in color and in black and white. You can see that even though they have colors, and even though neither one's been mixed with a particular white or black tint, one has a lighter value than the other has. We can use this to mix these two colors together. One's showing our lighter value, one is showing our darker value. Yeah, I haven't mentioned this yet before, but if you have one of these sharpeners here with two barrels in it, the large one and the small one's for writing pencils. That's going to give me a longer point, good for writing. The shorter one is what I would want to use for a colored pencil though. It tends to make the tip of it shorter but wider. That wider part is going to make it so it doesn't break as easily. To do a color transition, you can see I started saturating and then I went over to grading or shading. Then I crisscrossed my other color, doing the same thing. And then after that, I'm just going to go back over it like this. I'm going to clean it up. I'm going to mix those two colors together a little bit more. Tinting is pretty straightforward. I'm simply taking a color and I'm tinting it lighter or darker. So in this case, I'm taking the blue. I'm going to shade the blue in there. I'm going to go from a dark to a light to a dark. And I'm going to take a white color pencil and I'm going to tint the middle section. I'm going to blend that through, and afterwards I'm going to create a tinted appearance in this middle of this blue box. Stippling works best with a marker. I'll say that again. Stippling works best with a marker or with a pen that has a fountain tip. In other words, not a roller ball. I have a Sharpie here. If you've got a Sharpie, you can do it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a series of dots. They're going to be close together to this side, and then you're going to spread them further apart to the other side. Blocking can be done using anything you want. In this case, I'm just going to use some kind of cubes or kind of rectangles all blocked together close. Then I spread them out again. What I'm really showing here is density. I'm changing the density of objects to create the illusion of value. Like back to the example I gave of the bowling balls. You can really create value using anything when you're using the blocking method. All right, I saved this last one because this one's near and dear to my heart because I use cross-hatching in my own artwork quite a bit. What I'm going to recommend is getting yourself a pen. It's on your supply list anyhow, but get yourself a pen, preferably a ballpoint pen. That means it's got the little roller ball on the tip. For cross-hatching, I'm going to have my lines go in one direction. They're going to be parallel to each other. I can lighten my pressure, that can affect it, but I can also keep my pressure consistent. Here you can see my box now looks like it's going from dark to light to dark again. The cross part of cross-hatching happens when I take a second set of parallel lines and I run them over top of the surface. In doing this, you can see I'm starting to accent the dark areas, and I'm starting to create some new areas of value also. Practice doing lots of crossover lines, lots of cross-hatching. In fact, a lot of artists will actually use their pencils when they're doing a pencil drawing, and for shading, they actually do cross-hatching but with a pencil. In doing so, you can vary your pressure, and again, it can affect the lightness and the darkness on top of the fact that you're also doing the method called cross-hatching. Worksheet 2. For our second worksheet today, we're going to the last worksheet in your book, number 3. This is going to be your value scale. So if you look, I have a series of boxes. Each one of these boxes has a blank box next to it. What you're going to be doing is you're going to be replicating each box's value by practicing different methods in shading. I only want you to do this to the first 2 boxes. So in this case, I'm simply taking my pencil, I'm doing those small overlapping circles or ovals. I'm pushing down hard. I'm going to build up a value. What I want to do is I want to have it so it's nice and even and consistent. It's been saturated into that area. I want to try copy that value as best I can. Unfortunately, because graphite is reflective, it's going to reflect the light, which means it's not going to look as dark as the ink does on this sheet. My camera, unfortunately, is not able to pick up the subtle differences there. So, you're just going to have to take my word for it that I'm going from dark to lighter to lightest. I'm going to go through these boxes and again consistently shade them in. I shouldn't see a lot of gaps. I shouldn't see rough edges. And you're trying to color, well, not color, but add value within the box. You're trying to shade only within the box itself. For a prior lesson, I did these texture cubes, and these are all in graphite. You may be wondering, how is it that they're so clean looking? Well, this is how. I always take a piece of paper. Doesn't have to be a good piece of paper, but I take a piece of paper. I put that onto the surface of the drawing because of this. If you look at the opposite side of my page, you're going to see this like haze. It's the graphite that transferred over. So that brings me to an important thing you should be knowledgeable of. There's a technique that some people use where they'll start to shade in an area like this, and then they're going to take their thumb or their finger or something, and they're going to smudge it, because graphite smudges really well. This is a technique, but don't use it. Not yet. You're not ready for it yet. Smudging is a technique, but when we're learning to shade, it's a lot better to learn how to layer than it is to smudge. So don't do this, because all that's going to happen is going to turn your artwork into just this gray blah with no light contrasts and no dark contrasts. Now, I will get graphite on the side of my hand, and when that happens, I can smear it. So when I'm doing a drawing, I always get a sheet of paper, and I put that piece of paper down first. When I do this, it makes it I'm not going to transfer the graphite from my hand to the paper or from my paper to my hand. So now I can go through and shade, and it's not going to get on my hand. So always put down a buffer page if you are doing large work in graphite. So going back to my shadow scales, I want to make sure I put down this buffer page. That will keep my hand nice and clean and make it so I don't transfer graphite or smudge it. Now that I'm all done there, I'm going to go to my second series. And here I can do whatever I want. If you want to do cross-hatching, if you want to do stippling, does not matter to me. I'm going to do scribbling. So I'm going to show you how scribbles themselves, just scribbles, as long as I'm being even with how I do them and I'm changing the density, it's going to show different levels of value. Worksheet 3. Your third worksheet today deals with form. Form is the last element of art that we're going to be covering, and it's pretty basic to understand. Form deals with three-dimensionality. In other words, if something looks like it has 3 dimensions, it has form. So this jar here, we can tell looks like it has 3 dimensions. Part of the reason why we can tell that has to do with the shape, but what it also has to do with is the amount of value. You can see there are highlights on it that are giving us a sense that it's rounded. We can see shadows towards the edges to tell us that it goes into a shadowed area. Even though it's clear, it still has a sense of form. We still can tell that it's 3-dimensional. Color has value. Value shows form. So the last worksheet in your book has a series of circles and it has a cube. Hey, side note, if you ever need to make a circle, don't forget you can always take something that's already circular and you can circle around it. Take the simple circles that are on there and you're going to take this, well, we technically would call this 2D. It's starting to become 3D, but I want you to take these things and I want you to, using whatever method you prefer, shade them in. Shade them in so they look like they're coming up out of the page or they're sitting on the page. Shade them in so that value is going to show us form. So doing one side of this cube, well, that does something. Doing the other side of the cube, a different value. It's going to make it look more 3-dimensional. But I've got these spheres, and spheres, the way I always do them is I think about where my light is coming in. Let's say my light is going to come in from over here. Since my light's coming in from here, that means that the opposite side, it's going to be in shadow. So I want to make sure that when I shade in the circle to turn it into a sphere, I want to make sure that the side opposite of my light source, right there, is coming in at a very dark value. And the side facing my light source, it's going to be in the lightest value. You notice that when I shade, I like to contour to the shape of the object. So this is a rounded shape, so I'm doing rounded lines as I work. There you have it. That's the entirety of the worksheet. Turn those objects from 2D objects into 3D objects. Have fun with it. Again, if you don't want to just do plain shading, use cross-hatching.
What you just did are exercises to build value. They're basically no different than if I'm going to play basketball, I want to warm up and I want to practice making the shot or practice passing the ball or whatever else. It's not the actual game, but it's a huge part of the game because it's the part where we learn how to do the basics of the game. Shading and creating value in your artwork, that's the basics of making visual art. It doesn't matter what medium you're working with. You could be painting, but to understand how value works and how to build on your value into your artwork, it is, I'm going to say, maybe one of the most, if not the most important part of making the artwork look the way that you want it to look. That is, of course, if you're a person that wants to draw things that look real. Abstract art, there's a whole other can of worms and that shading's not needed there. I cannot wait to see the work that you do on your exercise sheets and, more importantly, on the big studio this week. I am genuinely super excited because this right here, this lesson, this truly is where your artistic side is going to be able to start coming out. Where you're going to start making artwork that is what you want to make, simply employing some of the techniques that I'm going to show you. This is where I get to see who you are as an artist. Friends, I am proud of you, and I am proud of what you are doing in the visual arts. I am so excited to see what you do with shading, with building value. Until next time, please remember, be kind to yourself and keep on creating. I'm Mr. Morris. Have a great day.